There is a lie that almost every ADHD entrepreneur tells themselves. And the reason it's so destructive is because it feels completely true. But the whole time, it is the thing that is secretly keeping you stuck. Now, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Jack Taylor and I've got ADHD, or what I call a hunter brain. I work with entrepreneurs who have the same wiring, helping them to build execution systems and businesses around the brain that they actually have, rather than them constantly fighting against it. Now, I believed this lie myself for about 3 years before I realized what was actually going on. Now, in this video, I'm going to tell you what that lie is and the neurological reason your brain is wired to keep you believing it. And I'm going to give you a practical exercise that you can do today that is going to show you in black and white how deep this goes for you. Now, I want you to think about the last time that you felt really behind in your business. Maybe your revenue plateaued, or you were feeling overwhelmed, or you just can't move the important stuff forward no matter how hard you try. In that moment, what did you do? If you're anything like me, and you're anything like the people that I work with, you went looking for more information. You bought another book. You listened to another podcast. Maybe you invested some money in a mentor's course, framework, or strategy, because that's what makes sense, right? If things aren't working, you need to go and learn some more. You need to find that missing piece. So you consume, and you consume, and you consume. And here's the mad thing. It actually feels like you're making a ton of progress. You're learning loads. You've made an abundance of notes. You're making lots of connections, and you're probably thinking to yourself, this is the thing that's going to change everything. But then a month goes by, and nothing in your business has actually changed. You've just got more knowledge, but you're left with the exact same results. Now, I lived in that cycle for years, and I'm going to come back to my story in a minute, because it's actually embarrassing how long it took me to figure this out. But first, I need to explain what's going on here neurologically, because once you understand this whole pattern will make sense, and it will ensure that you don't blame yourself for it. If you've got what I call a hunter brain, which is a brain that is higher up on the ADHD spectrum, you've got a lower baseline level of dopamine than most people, which means that you need more stimulation to feel engaged. And the act of learning, consuming new information, discovering a new framework in a book, or listening to a podcast where someone explains something in a way that you haven't heard before, that is incredibly stimulating. Every new idea that you come across gives your brain a little hit of novelty. And novelty is basically dopamine on tap for us. So your brain goes, yes, give me some more of that, because it thinks that you're making a shit ton of progress. But that progress is actually an illusion, because that dopamine you're getting is actually coming from the consumption and not the results. In essence, your brain is rewarding you for the learning and not for the doing. Now, let's look at the flip side of this, execution. It'd be safe to say that that is low stimulation work. It often takes a lot and quite a long time for your brain to actually give you any form of dopamine for it. So if there's no novelty, no immediate sense of progress, and not a lot of dopamine, your brain is going to default back to what makes it feel good, which is the immediate dopamine hit it gets from learning more. And around and around and around it goes. Now, this is actually one of the core operating laws of this brain type. We are interest-driven rather than importance-driven. What this means is that most people can force themselves to do things because it's important, even if it's somewhat boring. They can sit down, grit their teeth, and power through. But the reality is, we can't. Or we can, but it costs us 10 times the amount of mental energy. And we struggle to sustain it for more than a few days before the whole thing starts to collapse. You see, our brains prioritize what's interesting, stimulating, and novel, regardless of what's actually important. And learning will always be more interesting to our brains than executing because of how accessible the dopamine is that we get from obtaining new information. And that then keeps us in this trap of consuming. And your brain is going to keep rewarding you for staying in that trap, but you are going to keep wondering why nothing is changing. Now, let me tell you how deep this went for me. It's embarrassing, but it is the truth. For about 2 or 3 years, I was reading easily 2 books a week. I had Alex Hormozy's podcast on repeat, and I spent thousands upon thousands to learn every framework and strategy that I could get my hands on. And truth be told, I felt really sharp. If you sat me down and asked me how to build a multi-6-figure business, I could walk you through it step by step. And ironically, I was getting paid to do so. I had the knowledge of someone that was doing 5 times what I was doing. But the problem is, my results were not reflecting the amount of knowledge that I'd acquired. Honestly, I must have listened to $100 million offers at least 4 times, thinking that the answer was in there somewhere. But the truth is, I already had the answer after the first listen. I just wasn't doing anything with it. I found myself stuck in this cycle of finishing an audiobook, getting this rush of motivation, and then immediately starting the next. And then I get that same rush again and not stop long enough to actually implement any of the insights that I was getting from these books. I felt like a heroin addict that was chasing the dragon. The act of constantly consuming information was the hit. And at the time, I didn't have a clue that it was happening. But the moment it really clicked for me was when I was incredibly frustrated and I forced myself to look at those around me that were doing better than me. Now, there was this one guy that was in a mastermind that I was in. And I don't say this in the slightest to be arrogant, but he knew significantly less than me about strategy, marketing, and positioning. We'd have conversations, and in most cases, I'd be 3 steps ahead of him on pretty much most topics, actually putting that knowledge that I had to use by giving him advice on how he could grow his business. But the funny thing is, his business was doing double what mine was. And it wasn't because he was working harder, he had a better offer, or he got lucky. It was because every single thing he learned He went away and he implemented. He wasn't reading 5 books a month. He read 1, maybe 2 books a quarter at a push. But by the time he'd finished a book, something in his business had changed as a result. There was actually utility in the information that he was consuming. And I was sat there with a library's worth of knowledge and fuck all to show for it. That is the moment when I finally saw the lie for what it is. Now I want you to drop a comment if this has been you, because I'd love to know how many of you have been in this exact trap yourselves. Now this lie lives in a single sentence that you likely repeat to yourself on a frequent basis. And it is this: I know what I need to do, I just need to go and do it. I used to say this all the fucking time, and I hear it every single week from the people that I work with now, and it sounds completely reasonable. But what you're actually doing when you say that is misdiagnosing your own problem. You're treating your situation like a knowledge gap, as if what's standing between you and your results is more information, and it isn't. You have an execution gap, and those are 2 completely different problems that require 2 totally different solutions. If you genuinely don't know what to do, then you do need to go and read more books or pay someone to teach you. That is the right prescription for a knowledge problem. But if you do know what to do and you're not doing it consistently, which is likely the majority of you watching or listening to this now, because I am yet to meet a hunter brain that doesn't know what to do to grow the business that they want. At that point, taking on more knowledge is like taking paracetamol when you've got a broken leg. It's not wrong per se, but it's solving a different problem to the one that you have and that you should actually be addressing. And the reason most of us naturally default to the paracetamol is because of what I've just described. Your brain gives you a shit ton more dopamine for learning than it does for executing. So you keep reaching for the thing that feels like progress, even though it's the thing that's keeping you stuck where you are right now. Now I said that I'm going to give you something practical, so I want you to actually do this when you finish watching. Think back to the last 60 days, and I want you to write down every book you've read and every podcast you've binged. Make a note of all the things that you heard. When you thought to yourself, that's a good shout, I should probably do that. Now you're likely going to have a very long list, and that is okay. Now I want you to go through that list and cross-reference it with how many of those ideas actually got implemented. How many of them turned into real change for either your business or your behavior? And I need you to be totally honest with yourself, because for most of you, that number is going to be embarrassingly small in comparison to how much you actually consume. Now, don't worry, it was for me too. But that gap between what you learned and what you did, that is your execution gap. And that is the thing that actually needs solving. Now, from that long list, I want you to pick one thing. Maybe it's one idea or one strategy, but it needs to be the one thing that would have the biggest impact on your business right now if you actually went and implemented it. I then want you to map out every step that needs to happen for that idea to go from something that you know to something that you've actually gone and done. Because this is the start of training yourself to stop being a knowledge consumer and start becoming an aggressive implementer. Nowadays, I've actually got a rule for myself that you might want to adopt too. I do not move on to the next book until I've consolidated all of my notes from it and taken at least one action that is going to change either my business or my behavior. Otherwise, let's be honest, what is the point? If I carry on hoarding information, then it's just expensive entertainment disguised as work. Now, as I said, I used to blow through 2 books a week and felt like I was smashing it. Whereas now, I often spend 3 weeks studying one single book. The difference is, by the time I'm done, something has actually shifted because I've implemented something from that information. Look, collecting knowledge makes you feel smarter. There's no doubt about it. But becoming an aggressive implementer actually changes your results. And starting today, I need you to stop telling yourself the lie. You've known what to do for a while now. The question is, are we actually going to build a system that makes us do it? And that system has to be built for the brain that we actually have. It has to account for the dopamine gaps, the interest-driven wiring, and the fact that willpower is never going to be enough on its own. Otherwise, we're just going to keep cycling through the same pattern. Learn something new, get a rush of motivation, not implement any of it, feel shit as a result, learn some more to make yourself feel better, and repeat. I don't want that for you because I've lived in it long enough to know how soul-destroying it is. Now, I've spent the last few years building an execution system that is specifically designed for how our brains work. It is made up of 7 different layers, and each one addresses a different part of why you're not executing consistently. And in this video here, I'm going to walk you through the whole thing. So give it a click, and I'll see you there.